Who are you without his attention? What do you do when you are not needed by him? If these questions scare you, this video is exactly for you. It's time to find the identity you lost and discover why you don't actually need his validation.
Okay, so today we're really diving deep, aren't we? We're going to tackle something that, well, it's kind of a subtle lie, a story we get told about love, you know the one I mean. This idea that real love, true love, has to be this constant draining effort, like it demands nonstop struggle, endless chasing, huge sacrifices, and just total round-the-clock emotional availability. And this story, this narrative, it really sets you up for devastation, doesn't it? For that moment when things go quiet, the texts stop coming, the calls disappear, and that person, that presence you relied on, just pulls away.
hmm And that feeling, that sheer panic, when a partner starts to ignore you. No, we really need to get this. It isn't just sadness. It's not simple disappointment. It's actually a primal alarm bell ringing deep inside your biology. That's fundamentally a survival mechanism kicking in. And understanding that, that's the crucial first step towards getting some perspective, some freedom.
Wow, okay, a survival mechanism. That sounds pretty intense. Explain that a bit more.
The biology of feeling. Ghosted, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We could look directly at neurological studies here. There's some really fascinating work, like studies done at Purdue University, for instance. They give us this stunning physiological window into emotional pain. They mapped brain activity, you see, and what they found was, well, it's kind of mind-blowing. The brain activates the exact same regions when you feel intense emotional rejection as it does when you suffer a physical injury, a real physical wound.
Wait, really? The exact same. So my brain feeling ditched, it registers that pain with the same kind of urgency as like breaking my arm or getting burned. That's incredible.
Precisely. We're talking about specific areas like the dorsal posterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC. These are the classic physical pain processing centers. And when you experience rejection, bam, they light up. Your nervous system at that fundamental level, it really doesn't make a huge distinction between the agony of a physical wound and the agony of social exclusion or emotional rejection. Think about it evolutionarily. For our ancestors, getting kicked out of the tribe, being rejected socially, that often meant death. Survival literally depended on staying connected, staying in the group.
Okay, I get it now. So fast forward to today. I'm sitting here staring at my phone, no texts, and I feel like I'm falling apart. That urge, that desperate need to reconnect, send another message, check their last seen time, obsessively, it genuinely feels like I'm fighting for my life.
Yes.
Because the threat, even though it's just to my ego or my sense of self, it's registering as actual physical danger, existential pain.
Exactly that. The panic makes perfect sense when you see it that way. It explains the compulsion, the feeling that you have to do something, anything to fix it. You feel like you're fighting for survival, even if the only thing truly under threat is the identity you've maybe built around being the loved one or the one they need.
Okay, let's really unpack this then. Because our mission today, what we want to achieve in this deep dive, it's transformative, right? We're not here to give you quick fixes. This isn't about, play hard to get tactics or those surface level dating games. No, we're going deep. We're dissecting the core psychology here, dependency, distance, what real self-worth actually looks like in this context. The goal is to help you get to a place where someone else's distance doesn't feel like a personal death sentence anymore. So yeah, stick with us, prepare yourself, because I think we're going to hit on some major aha moments, some foundational truths about how you relate. So we have to start with maybe a slightly uncomfortable question, a direct question for you listening right now. If your emotional stability, your day-to-day sense of okayness totally hinges on your partner being constantly available. If your inner peace just shatters every time he takes an hour, maybe two, to text back. And if your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself, is built almost entirely on how much validation he gives you. We really need to pause and ask, is this actually love we're talking about?
Or is it something else? Psychologically speaking, what you're describing there links heavily into emotional dependency. It's just very cleverly, sometimes unconsciously, disguised as passionate romance.
Dependency disguised as romance, that hits hard.
It does. And we need to be really clear about where the suffering is truly coming from. When he pulls away, the surface problem seems obvious. He's ignoring you. But the deeper issue, the one that's really causing the agony, it's that you need him not to ignore you, to feel okay, to feel safe, to feel whole, to feel like you even exist sometimes.
Wow.
If your whole foundation of self, your sense of worth, your inner peace, your value is so fragile that one person's temporary absence sends your entire world spinning off its axis. then the core issue isn't just the relationship dynamic. It's an internal infrastructure problem. It's about having outsourced your emotional regulation.
Outsourced emotional regulation.
Yeah.
That's a powerful phrase. It's like you've literally handed someone else the remote control to your own nervous system.
Pretty much.
You've put your peace, your stability, entirely in their pocket. And they might not even know it or want it.
Exactly. And that internal fragility, that outsourcing, it leads directly to something clinicians often see, something called emotional hypervigilance.
Okay, what's that?
It's this state of constant high alert anxiety. The person, often the woman in heterosexual relationships we're discussing, becomes like a 247 relationship detective, always scanning, always monitoring, searching for tiny cues, a shift in tone, a slight delay in response, a word choice, anything that might signal the connection is stable, or more often signs that it's starting to fail. Their own survival feels like it depends on correctly deciphering the partner's internal state.
God, that sounds exhausting. What does that actually look like day to day? Give me some practical examples of that hypervigilance.
Oh, it's incredibly draining. It's the constant checking of their online status, the read receipts. It's analyzing a one-word text message like, okay, for hours, convinced it means affection is waning. It's spending ages crafting the perfect response, not to genuinely communicate, but to avoid saying anything at all that might possibly trigger him or confirm whatever reason you suspect he needs distance.
Right. Trying to preemptively manage his feelings.
Yes, obsessively. And the timing. He usually texts back in 15 minutes. Why did this one take 40? What does it mean? Did I say something wrong? Is he with someone else? It's a spiral.
So the partner stops being just a person you love. They become this source of stability you desperately require, almost like a utility.
That's a stark way to put it, but yes, functionally that's what happens. And this whole pattern often ties back to attachment theory, specifically the anxious preoccupied attachment style. People with this style have this deep, intense fear of abandonment. So when they sense even a slight withdrawal from a partner, their alarm system goes haywire, and they engage in what we call protest behaviors.
Protest behaviors, like what?
Things like clinging tighter, becoming more demanding, maybe picking fights to get a reaction, constantly seeking reassurance, or even lashing out. On an unconscious level, all these actions are desperate attempts to close the distance, restore that feeling of connection, and silence that primal abandonment fear.
Which brings us right back to that painful paradox you mentioned earlier. The very things you do to try and fix the distance, to soothe the fear,
Are precisely the behaviors that almost guarantee the other person feels smothered, pressured, and wants even more distance.
But it's true. That desperate urgency, that panic-driven need to restore contact immediately. When you act from that place of emotional emergency, when your texts practically scream neediness instead of just connection, well, those panicked actions often end up validating his initial feeling, maybe his subconscious thought that he did need some space. It becomes this awful self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, but before we go further down that path, it's really, really crucial we try to depersonalize his silence a bit. This step is vital if you want to regain your emotional footing. We need to bring in some psychological context about why many men, specifically, tend to withdraw when they're facing stress or uncertainty or internal conflict.
Yeah, because the default reaction, especially maybe for women conditioned by certain cultural narratives, is always, he's pulling away, it must be me, he's unhappy with me.
Exactly. And that assumption, while understandable, is often flat out wrong. It completely misses some fundamental, sometimes gendered differences in how people process emotional distress. Look at the research organizations like the American Psychological Association track this stuff. It consistently shows that men are roughly 40% less likely than women to actively reach out for verbal or emotional support when they're dealing with conflict, uncertainty, or just difficult feelings.
40%. Wow, that's a huge difference. Why? Why that gap? Why solitude over talking it out?
It's likely a mix of things. Biology, maybe evolutionary history, and definitely social conditioning play big roles. Historically, you could argue there was an evolutionary advantage for men to withdraw, assess a threat calmly, analyze options in solitude, and make decisions without sort of emotional interference clouding judgment.
The lone protector, figuring things out.
Kind of, yeah. And then society heavily reinforces this. Boys are often taught, implicitly or explicitly, that showing vulnerability, admitting uncertainty, or needing emotional comfort makes them seem weak or less masculine.
Right. Be strong. Man up. Handle your business.
Precisely. This creates this deeply ingrained script. I have to be the rock. I need to figure this out and fix the problem internally on my own. So when he's wrestling with a major issue at work, or questioning his whole career path, or trying to sort out complex feelings about commitment level, His conditioned go-to response is often, okay, I need to pull back, create some mental space, process this alone. His goal, very often, is actually resolution, not rejection.
Okay, so picture this. You've got these two totally different realities happening at the same time. Reality A, he's genuinely wrapped up in his own internal world, maybe trying to get clarity on his feelings, figure out if he can commit, deal with external stress. His method is silence, space, internal processing.
Correct. That's his internal reality.
Reality B, she's watching this silence from the outside.
Ah.
And through the lens of her own anxiety, maybe that hypervigilance we talked about, she's interpreting his internal process as direct external evidence of her failure.
Yes. She translates his need for space into proof. Something is terribly wrong with me, or I knew it, I pushed him away. She takes his internal coping mechanism and metabolizes it as a devastating personal judgment against her.
And that translation, that leap from he's stressed to I'm unworthy, that's where all the acute anxiety floods in.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But hang on, we need to pause here because this is where it gets really nuanced, and it's a critical distinction we have to make. How do we tell the difference between what you just described, relatively healthy internal processing that just needs temporary space, and a more problematic, maybe even calculated emotional withdrawal, the kind used for control or punishment or just chronic avoidance?
Yes. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because let's be real, a lot of emotionally mature partners absolutely do use needing space as a kind of weapon or just as a way to duck responsibility.
Okay, the key difference usually boils down to two things: communication and consistency. A partner who is genuinely processing but still invested in the relationship's health might need space, yes, but they respect the partnership. They communicate it, even briefly. Something like, hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed with work pressure right now. I need a couple of days just to get my head straight. I'll check in properly tomorrow night. Just wanted you to know it's not about us. See the difference?
Yeah, there's reassurance there, an expectation set, a connection maintained even during the space.
Exactly. He sets a time frame, offers reassurance, acknowledges the impact on you, and maintains the connection. Now, contrast that with the partner who's using distance for control or avoidance, or who is simply emotionally unavailable. They withdraw silently, abruptly. Leaving this vacuum of agonizing uncertainty, their withdrawal isn't about processing. It's often a form of passive-aggressive punishment, or maybe just a stark revelation of their fundamental inability or unwillingness to handle emotional intimacy and communication.
Okay, so the liberating truth then, for you listening, is that his distance, regardless of whether it's that healthier processing or the more problematic avoidance, fundamentally has nothing to do with your intrinsic worth, your attractiveness, your capacity to be loved.
Absolutely. Nailed it. His silence is not a cosmic judgment on your value as a person. It's not confirmation that you are not enough or flawed. It is a reflection of his internal processing style, his level of emotional maturity, his current capacity or lack thereof for a consistent communicative relationship. And when you can truly internalize that, when you gain the freedom to stop seeing his distance as a mirror reflecting your supposed failures, that is when the real healing starts.
Okay, so making that psychological shift, understanding it's not about your worth. That brings us to something even deeper. A pattern we see a lot in therapy, often quite devastating, that we sometimes call the satellite effect. This happens with women and men too, but often women in this dynamic who have maybe unconsciously built their entire identity, their whole sense of purpose around being needed, around being necessary, indispensable, maybe the sole source of their partner's emotional stability or well-being.
When someone adopts this role, they often become incredibly skilled at anticipating needs, reading moods, being perpetually available, smoothing things over. Their existence, their self-worth becomes completely wrapped up in the orbit they maintain around their partner. So when that partner, the planet, in this analogy, pulls away or needs less, the satellite doesn't just feel rejected, they feel useless, functionless.
Yeah.
Their purpose evaporates because they fundamentally outsource their sense of meaning to that role of being needed.
This is where we have to get a bit uncomfortable, isn't it? Ask some really challenging questions. We need to confront you, the listener, directly right now with the reality of your own self-sovereignty, maybe.
Yeah. If you recognize yourself in this satellite description, if you feel your world crumbles when his attention wavers, you have to ask yourself these hard questions. Who are you when you're not actively being necessary to someone else? What defines your days, your thoughts, your value, when you're not monitoring his needs, his moods, his reactions? What were your passions, your goals, your simple independent pleasures? before maybe his dreams, his needs, his dramas became the most important things in your life.
Because often the deepest root of the suffering when he pulls away isn't actually his neglect. It's the terrifying, gut-wrenching realization that you don't really know who you are without his gaze, without his need for you. You've used his validation, his neediness perhaps, as the very foundation of your self-esteem. And when he withdraws that, the whole structure collapses because there's nothing underneath holding it up.
Let's make this really concrete. Remember that patient anecdote we discussed? Her experience is just a perfect, albeit painful, illustration of this satellite effect in action. This woman was completely, utterly shattered when her partner of 2 years started getting distant. She kept insisting to me, but our relationship was perfect. For 2 years, perfect. Why? Because, she explained, she had made sure she was always supportive, always available. She never caused him any problems.
So the relationship was perfect primarily because she had essentially erased herself to make it perfect. She achieved harmony by sacrificing her own emotional geography, her own needs.
Precisely. As we dug deeper in our sessions, we uncovered example after example of these seemingly small self-sacrifices that had, over time, completely eroded her independent identity. We're not talking about healthy compromise here. We're talking about the loss of essential parts of herself.
Like what specifically? What did she give up?
Okay, for instance, she gradually stopped seeing her own close group of female friends. Why? Because her partner was more introverted, preferred quiet nights in, and she worried suggesting girls' nights out would feel like pressure to him. So she just stopped. Her personal hobbies, things she genuinely loved, things that lit her up, like reading classic novels, something she'd done since childhood, and painting, she abandoned them. She explicitly told me she stopped reading much because he once casually remarked, "Isn't that kind of a waste of time?"
Wow.
And she stopped painting because he'd labeled it an impractical hobby. She just absorbed his judgments, his preferences, until they became her own self-imposed limitations. She didn't even fight it.
She just let parts of herself wither away to keep the peace, to be easy.
And even more critically, on a bigger scale, she put her own professional ambitions on the back burner. She had career goals, ideas, things she wanted to pursue. But his needs, his stressful days at work, his emotional ups and downs, they always took precedence. She became his primary emotional regulator, pouring her energy into supporting his career ascent, making herself feel necessary by managing his moods. Her own trajectory just stalled. She even stopped going to the gym regularly, something she enjoyed because he'd offer that kind of passive validation. "Oh, you're perfect just as you are."
Which sounds nice, but can actually be subtly controlling, right?
Yeah.
Minimizing her drive for independent self-improvement or enjoyment.
Exactly. So connect the dots. When he eventually started pulling away, maybe he got promoted, maybe he just needed less intense catering, maybe he met someone else. The reason almost doesn't matter when he stopped requiring that constant, intense emotional service. She didn't just lose a boyfriend. She experienced a total identity collapse.
She felt empty.
Utterly empty, yes, because she had completely, totally outsourced her sense of meaning, her purpose, her activities, her friendships, her value. It was all placed in his hands, contingent on his need for her. She was that satellite, diligently orbiting a planet, but generating absolutely no light, no direction, no gravity of her own. So when the planet shifted its orbit, stepped back, she had nothing internal to hold on to. She hadn't just lost the relationship. In a very real sense, she felt she had lost her entire reason for being. And this dynamic, sadly, happens to so many incredibly bright, capable people who tragically mistake that kind of self-erasure for true love.
Okay. Realizing that this potential for losing yourself, becoming that satellite, it leads us right into what I think of as this kind of cool but maybe inevitable law of human relationships. It's a paradox, really, because it flies in the face of all the romantic movies and songs. And the law is pretty simple, brutally simple maybe. The more you desperately need his attention just to feel okay about yourself, the less attractive, in a fundamental sense, you often become to him.
And we had to add the corollary. The more you depend on his validation for your core self-esteem, the less he tends to genuinely value you as a whole autonomous person. And the more you chase, the more you push for his presence when he's pulling back. Tragically, the faster and further he often retreats. It's counterintuitive, but it plays out again and again.
Why, though? Why does neediness repel even when someone might genuinely care? It feels backwards.
It's rooted deep in our psychology, often unconsciously. It links back to basic principles of perceived value and scarcity. Think about it. Whether we're talking about diamonds or time or even emotional availability, humans instinctively tend to place higher value on resources that are perceived as somewhat scarce, independent, autonomous, not just guaranteed on tap.
Yeah.
When you present yourself energetically as a resource that is perpetually, desperately available, completely dependent on his input for your own stability, the perceived value, unfortunately, often decreases.
It's like this invisible, almost heartless equation playing out. The person who needs the most gets the least attention. The one who chases the hardest pushes their quarry further away. But we need to be super clear here, right? Are we talking about manipulation? Is this about playing games, like pretending to be busy or aloof?
No, absolutely not. And this is probably the most crucial distinction to make in this whole conversation. This is not about adopting manipulative tactics, faking indifference, or playing hot and cold games. That's just putting on a mask, right? And masks eventually slip, facades crumble. Plus, it's inauthentic and unhealthy. This is about something much deeper and much more real. It's about genuinely finding your center again. It's about truly recuperating your autonomy, taking back the reins of your own emotional well-being, and understanding deep in your bones that your happiness is your job, not his.
Okay. So when a woman or anyone really genuinely does that work, when she shifts from maybe that anxious, preoccupied pattern towards a more secure attachment style, when she truly centers herself, that's when we see that magnetic shift happen, right? It can look almost magical from the outside, like suddenly he's interested again. But you're saying it's not magic, it's just an energetic shift.
Yeah.
Based on her internal rewiring.
Exactly. The entire energy she projects changes. It shifts from emanating need, that vibration of desperation, lack, emptiness, what some call carencia, to emanating plenitude. She starts projecting abundance, wholeness, self-sufficiency. She's no longer looking to the partner to complete her. She's coming from a place of being already complete and choosing to share her life, her fullness with him.
Let's use that analogy we touched on earlier, maybe deepen it. It's the difference between someone who is literally dying of thirst in a desert, desperately gulping down any water they can find just to survive,
Survival mode.
versus someone who is already perfectly hydrated, comfortable, maybe sitting by a pool, and they choose to slowly savor a beautiful glass of wine, not because they need it to live, but purely for the pleasure, the enjoyment, the enhancement of the moment.
That's a perfect analogy. The first person needs the water for sheer survival. Their focus is entirely on lack and getting the need met. The second person chooses the wine as an addition to an already satisfying state, and a mature, emotionally healthy partner. They can feel that difference almost instantly. It's palpable. He's naturally drawn to a woman who feels complete in herself. Someone who chooses to be with him, wants to be with him, but who clearly demonstrates she can also be perfectly okay, happy, fulfilled, and functional without him. Her presence then feels like a gift, freely offered from her abundance, not an obligation extracted from her neediness.
Okay, so what does that actually look like in behavior? This plenitude, this centeredness, how does she act differently day to day when she's in that state versus the anxious chasing state?
Well, she's consistent in her own life, but she's not clingy. She maintains her own boundaries, her own routines, even when he is available and attentive. This means she keeps pursuing her independent goals, her hobbies, seeing her friends, investing in her career, regardless of whether he texts back in 5 minutes or 5 hours. Her life has its own momentum. It means sometimes saying, "No, I can't tonight," without guilt or fear, when his spontaneous invitation conflicts with plans she already made for herself, plans that matter to her. Her world doesn't grind to a halt and wait for his call.
Right. Her life isn't just reactive to him.
Exactly. She maintains her own trajectory. And this independence, crucially, doesn't signal coldness or lack of interest. To a secure, mature partner, it signals emotional self-sovereignty. It signals she's an equal with her own rich inner and outer world. And that is incredibly attractive. Now, let's flip the perspective again for a moment. We really need to analyze the sheer psychological weight, the pressure that intense emotional dependency places on the person on the receiving end when you, maybe unknowingly, make your entire emotional stability, your happiness, your sense of worth, totally reliant on him. He stops being just a partner. He morphs into something much bigger, much heavier. He becomes your primary emotional regulator, your sole source of validation, your make-me-feel-okay project, practically your life's purpose.
Wow, yeah, hearing it put like that, that's an absolutely crushing burden. It's a responsibility no healthy person can or should carry indefinitely for someone else. It's bound to lead to burnout, resentment, and ironically, it creates the very distance, the very withdrawal you were so desperately trying to prevent by clinging tighter.
Exactly. Try putting yourself in his shoes for a second. Seriously, listener, how would you feel if someone, anyone, a friend, a family member, a partner, depended on you for every single scrap of their happiness? If they panicked and needed constant reassurance every time you needed just a little space to breathe or manage your own stress, If they interpreted every bad mood you had, every quiet moment, as proof that they were fundamentally flawed or unlovable.
I feel suffocated, pressured, trapped. I'd probably want to run for the hills, honestly.
Right. You'd instinctively crave space, freedom, retreat. This dynamic inevitably breeds resentment and exhaustion in the person being leaned on so heavily. And that just escalates their need for distance. It becomes a vicious cycle.
And yet, the cultural messages often tell us the opposite, don't they? They tell the person feeling anxious that if they do respect his need for space, well, that's showing a lack of commitment on their part. We're still fighting that pervasive myth that true love means constant enmeshment, requires relentless struggle, and maybe even demands the sacrifice of your own dignity and peace of mind.
We have to consciously, actively reject that myth. It's damaging. Instead, let's establish a clear psychological standard for what mature, healthy love actually looks like in these situations. Yes, a healthy partner will sometimes need space. They'll need time for introspection, for solitude, to process their own stuff that's just normal human functioning. But here's the crucial difference. A mature, committed partner communicates that need responsibly.
How? What does that sound like?
It sounds like clarity and reassurance. It sounds like, look, I'm dealing with some heavy stuff at work with family internally right now, and I really need some quiet time this weekend just to process it. But I want to be really clear. This is about my internal stuff. It's not about you or us. I value us deeply, and I'll connect properly on Monday. See? There's ownership. There's reassurance. There's a time frame. He doesn't just vanish, leaving you in a tailspin of anxiety, guessing games, and feeling insecure or abandoned. That communication is the vital lubricant. It's what distinguishes healthy self-care and boundary setting from emotional abandonment, manipulation, or just plain unavailability.
Okay, but what if that doesn't happen? What if he just withdraws, goes silent without explanation, uses that silence almost like a tool, maybe a form of control or punishment? Or just leaves you hanging in that prolonged, agonizing uncertainty where you feel like you have to chase and decode and beg for answers? What then?
Okay, this is critical. If that's the pattern, the unexplained withdrawal, the manipulative silence, the prolonged ambiguity that forces you into detective mode, then his distance is fundamentally not a problem for you to solve. It stops being about how do I get him back
Yeah.
and becomes valuable, critical information for you to process. You have to consciously shift your mindset. Stop chasing. Stop trying to fix him or the situation. Start observing. Start evaluating. His behavior, his silence, his lack of communication, that is the data point.
That's a huge reframe. So instead of reacting with panic and doubling down on the chase, you're saying step back, breathe, and see his withdrawal itself as information.
Got it.
Information about him, about his capacity. Okay, so how should you, the listener, process that data point constructively?
Right. First and hardest, detach the outcome from your self-worth. Remind yourself, constantly if necessary. This silence, this distance, it reflects his capacity, his communication skills, his issues, not my inherent inadequacy. Make that your mantra. Second, maybe set a quiet internal boundary or time limit for yourself. A mature partner who needs space but is invested will typically reconnect and clarify within a reasonable time frame, maybe a few days, depending on the context. If days bleed into weeks of radio silence or frustrating ambiguity, well, you have your information, don't you?
Yeah. The information is he's either unwilling or unable to provide the basic consistency and communication required for a healthy relationship.
Exactly. Third, if you're struggling to see clearly because anxiety is clouding your judgment, which is totally normal, reach out. Talk to a trusted, objective friend, a wise family member, or ideally, a therapist. Get an outside perspective to help you interpret the data without the distortion of your own fear or hope. Because sometimes, honestly, his unexplained, prolonged distance, it might feel like agony now, but it could actually be the universe doing you a massive, albeit painful, favor. It's revealing crucial information you needed to know about his character, his emotional maturity or lack thereof, his inability to show up consistently, or his fundamental unwillingness to build a truly reciprocal, respectful partnership. It hurts like hell in the moment, but accepting that information is what protects your future well-being.
Okay, so let's wrap this section up by really cementing what the listener deserves. Reiterating that standard clearly so they know when it's time to stop analyzing his behavior and start prioritizing their own needs and self-sovereignty.
Absolutely. Here's the bottom line. You deserve someone who chooses you consistently, day after day, week after week. Not someone you constantly have to chase, coax, or convince just to get basic attention, communication, or reassurance. You deserve a partner who actively seeks you out, who values connection and makes an effort to maintain it. Someone who can actually handle intimacy and vulnerability without shutting down or running away into prolonged, unexplained silence. You deserve someone who communicates, who includes you in their world, within reason, of course, and who makes you feel fundamentally secure and valued without requiring you to constantly audition for the part, prove your worth, or compete for scraps of their fragmented attention.
And if he can't or won't provide that fundamental level of consistency, communication, and reassurance.
Then his distance, no matter how much it hurts right now, is the clearest answer you could ever hope to receive. It's not a puzzle to solve. It's a destination sign pointing you towards relationships that can meet those needs. Hashtag tag outro. So let's try to synthesize the core message here, the main takeaway from this deep dive. It really boils down to this. When you finally truly stop the chasing, when you cease the desperate pursuit of attention, when you make a conscious decision to no longer accept emotional crumbs just to survive, you are actively, energetically creating the necessary space in your life. Space for the kind of consistent, mature, reciprocal love that you genuinely deserve. I know it feels like a terrible, agonizing loss in the immediate moment. That pain is real. Remember the brain science we talked about. You're grieving the idea of what you thought you had or could have, but please try to trust this. Stepping back, refusing to participate in that dynamic anymore, focusing on centering yourself. It's an immense gain for your future self. It's clearing the path for genuinely healthy, fulfilling relationships that are actually waiting for you down the road.
Yeah. And maybe here's the final, most provocative thought we want to leave you with today. The absolute bedrock truth of self-sovereignty. Your value as a human being exists entirely independent of any man's attention, any text message, any validation, any relationship status. You are worthy simply because you exist, inherently, period. And the real freedom, the real power in love comes when you can finally choose a partner from a place of plenitude, choosing to share your already full, already worthy life, not from a place of fear or lack or desperate need. Choose connection, always, but never out of necessity. Wow. Hey, if this deep dive resonated with you, if any of this clicked or maybe shifted your perspective on how you react when someone pulls away, please let us know. Show some support. It helps others find this conversation too. Go ahead and like this video. And definitely subscribe to Relationship Psychology. We do these deep dives regularly, exploring all sorts of complex emotional dynamics and psychological frameworks to help you build healthier connections.
And we genuinely love hearing from you. We want these conversations to be relevant to your life, your challenges right now. We really do read all the comments and suggestions.
Absolutely. So if you have a burning question about attachment styles, communication breakdowns, setting boundaries, or any other psychological puzzle in your relationships, please comment below. Let us know what topics you'd like us to tackle in future deep dives. Thank you so much for tuning in, for engaging with this. We really appreciate you spending this time with us. We'll talk soon.